Well, good afternoon. My name is Nate Schutta. I work for VMware. Best way to describe me is architect as a service. I get to go places again. I get to come back here. This is awesome. This is my third trip, I think, of 2022. It's very strange going from traveling all the time to not traveling at all and then now traveling again. And it's like, wait, how does this work? You kind of get out of the muscle memory of how to pack a bag and what you need to bring. I was telling somebody this on my way in. I had to clean out my bag because most of the things that were in it were expired. It's like, yeah, I guess I'd better get some fresher stuff. So anyway, best way to describe me is architect as a service. Although I will admit the first time someone called me that, I sounded the acronym out in my head and realized they may not have intended it as a compliment. But I am delighted to be here today with my friend, my colleague, the one and only Whitney Lee.
Hi, I'm Whitney. I'm a developer advocate at VMware, and I transitioned into this role in tech since the pandemic. So this is actually only my second in-person talk that I've ever given. So my heart feels like it's gonna jump out of my chest and kind of jump its way across the floor toward y'all. So if I just collapse at some point, you'll know why at least.
We didn't realize there was a splash zone in the front, I guess, is the moral of the story.
So what I'm good at is taking complex technical topics and making them into explainer videos. Some of my videos altogether, they have over 400,000 views on YouTube. It's pretty cool. So these days I live and breathe cloud technologies, but I didn't always. Before I joined tech, I had a career as a professional photographer.
Yep. So it turns out software projects don't always end the way we'd like with delighted customers. And it's interesting to think back and ask, why is failure so common? It's tempting to say, well, we must have chosen a bad technology. If only we'd used this other technology, everything would have worked perfectly. And that is possible. But you know what? To be honest with you, that's rarely why projects fail. Now, I have a traditional computer science undergraduate degree, and we sort of ignore people when we teach you how to do this, whether it's in an undergraduate program, whether it's in a boot camp. And frankly, that's at our own peril. Now, I'm sure like me, you have skipped a soft skills seminar. In fact, I got a Slack message from my boss this morning. Apparently, I'm in some trouble because I'm behind on some trainings that I'm supposed to do. So I guess I know what I'm doing tonight. And the reality is most of us learn to navigate these waters through trial and error. And that's probably okay. And I will admit that most of us don't come naturally to this. I think some of us get into this space because it's a way of escaping from kind of the messy human aspect of the world. A buddy of mine has this t-shirt. I'm a fan of this one, and I've made this phrase out loud more than once. I was going for a walk last summer and somebody has this painted on their car. I thought, all right, that's an interesting way of phrasing it. But the longer I'm in this industry, the more I realize dealing with people just comes with the paycheck. There's no getting around that. And just as there are patterns for how to develop software, it turns out there are patterns to work effectively with other human beings. There are techniques that we can apply that will help our projects succeed and actually make it more fun for everybody. This industry borrows from things that have been around longer, like construction. Think of some of the diagrams you've created. My title, architect, what is that? Well, we stole that from another industry because we just haven't been doing this very long. Well, it turns out we can actually apply lessons from seemingly unrelated fields to software.
And that's where I come in. When I first started in tech, I couldn't believe how much my photography knowledge came into play. But wait, that doesn't make sense. How does photography relate to software? The thing is, I wasn't just a photographer. I was a wedding photographer. And not only do weddings have a similar cadence and project lifecycle, weddings also involve a lot of people and therefore a lot of personalities, egos, and emotions. As a wedding photographer, I became very skilled at selling a vision, at demonstrating my competence quickly and deeply, at setting expectations, making my clients feel heard and respected, communicating with kindness and transparency, and delivering on my promises. During my time in tech, every one of those skills translated directly into working with people on software projects.
Turns out we can actually work together. We can be teammates as opposed to adversaries and being in this confrontational role. We just have to make sure everyone feels heard, everyone feels respected. And what we're really striving for here is this sort of shared excitement about this project that we're on. But we can only get there if we build trust. That's the first step in this whole process.
So with weddings, the first opportunity I had to build trust and demonstrate my knowledge with potential clients was during the interview. Mind you, by the end, I had well over a decade of wedding photography experience, not to mention a degree in photography. I'm teeming with wedding and photography knowledge, so much so it's leaking out of my eyes. And I'm sitting across the table from two people who are just starting to look into these subjects, possibly for the first time in their lives. So it's tempting for me to tell them everything I know. You should do this. I know how it's done. It goes like this, exactly like this. I know the best move. But do you know what the best thing to do with them is? Ask them questions. Ask informed questions, listen well, and use that knowledge to inform the next question. Follow the thread. Develop a clear picture in your mind and understand their vision, their priorities, and what's at stake for them.
Moral of the story is you never get a second chance to make a first impression. We get these opportunities. New project, new customer, new team. This is our chance to get things started on the right foot. So how do we get off to a rockin' good start, get everybody very excited? A lot of this boils down to empathy. Again, not something we teach in undergraduate computer science. We have to be able to put ourselves in our customers' shoes. I mean, not literally in their shoes. Please do keep your shoes on. Although I do know some presenters who like to present in without their shoes. Venkat does that all the time. The challenge for us is not to make assumptions. It's very easy to do that on projects. We can lose our credibility almost instantaneously if we're not careful. We build trust by listening. And I know this doesn't come naturally to a lot of us. I know it's a struggle for me. That's something my wife would attest to. You got to put on your listening hat and actually listen to what your customers are saying.
So, as I mentioned, I begin anytime with my clients by asking questions. So, this applies to both software and weddings. So, sometimes the clients come to me with a clear vision. Sometimes my questions help them develop one. And sometimes my questions expose differences of opinions in the stakeholders. And that's great, actually. Here at this beginning stage, it's a healthy and productive conversation. Then, both as a wedding photographer and on a software project, only after I have that clear vision of how I want their time with me to go, only then do I start showing them my work. And I choose to show them work only that is relevant to their goals. Now, I want to make two main points here. First, whenever possible, show, don't tell. Actions speak so much louder than words. This is your chance to demonstrate that you were listening and that you understand their wants and their needs. The second point is, don't always show the latest and greatest or the project that you consider to be your personal best. Consider their needs. I'm not going to show photographs of a 300-person luxury hotel wedding to a couple who's planning an intimate backyard gathering of only 15 people. Likewise, I wouldn't present a whole event-driven architecture solution when currently the client has only messaging between two microservices.
So the trick for us is to ask good questions. What kind of apps do you use today? What do you really like about those applications? What don't you like about those applications? What's holding you back? What takes too long? What's too complex? Did you get the defaults right? I teach a graduate program with full-time working adults, and one of my students told me one year that he sat down with a customer and was going to demo something to them, and immediately the customer went and unchecked all the defaults, and my student was surprised, like, wait, didn't we get that right? Aren't those your defaults? And the customer said, oh, no, we always uncheck those. And he said, I'm sorry, hold on a second, and he went back to his desk, he changed the configuration, pushed it, went back over and said, please refresh, and now the defaults were right. It's amazing how much credibility that built with his customer just by taking the time to say, wait, is this actually what you need? Now, the goal here is to become a trusted advisor to our customers. And these give us these opportunities to show our expertise. In other words, tell me you're a developer without telling me you are a developer. The challenge for us is we have this deep technical understanding. We've been doing this, some of us, for many, many years. We've been there, got the t-shirt. We know how the movie ends. You've got all this information. Be patient. You got to wait to share it. And I know how hard that is. We're all very excited, but just take a deep breath. It will work out. Trust me. We need to take the time to learn to listen to our customers. It means so much more when they ask for your advice. I have a teenager, and it's interesting to me to figure out when he's actually listening to me. Just the other day, he parroted something back, and I looked at my wife and I said, my God, he actually was listening. So I guess I just have to assume he always is, and then I always have to try to give him the best advice I can. The challenge for us then is to strategically deploy that when it is relevant to that particular client.
So I generally didn't talk to new clients about the technical details of photography. And of course, there's a mountain of technical details, but instead I let the work speak for itself. There are a few times when I did talk tech, though, and when I would educate as part of selling. If a couple's wedding had a component that is technically difficult to photograph, for example, a ceremony in a particularly small, dark room with no natural lights, I would talk about that difficulty. I would teach them about what made it hard and what I would do to solve the problem. Then I would show them results. I would show them examples of work I'd done in a similar situation. So, besides building trust, educating about relevant technical details has two additional benefits. First, in software, if and when a client does some research and solutioning without your direct guidance, that never happens.
Never.
This will empower them to avoid pitfalls. Or if you're still in the selling phase, now the client will ask other potential vendors about how they would solve that problem and ask to see examples. So in wedding photography, I would go so far as to straight up suggest that they do that because I was confident it would give me a leg up. So wedding couples typically interview 3 photographers before hiring one for their big day. So I should be booking about 33%, but I booked at 90%. And I had this success because of what we've talked about, because I made them feel heard and understood. I demonstrated my knowledge with informed questions, and I showed relevant work.
So our job here is to educate our customer as we go. And if we're not careful, we can look insecure. Now, part of what makes this job hard is we have to translate this into terms our customers understand. We love the jargon and the techno talk. It's kind of how you know who's in the tribe or not, and it does give us a shorthand, but that doesn't work for our customers. We need to make sure we're using their language. To most of the universe, spring is a season, not a Java framework. Right? And we get so caught up in, but everybody knows this. I can tell you from my experience, one of the worst things you can have is a customer who does get into the weeds. I will never forget, far along in the past, having to have these conversations with my VP about the fact that her peer on the business side kept asking about WSDLs. And I was like, why has he even heard the term WSDL? This is not in his field at all. That was a lot of fun. We need to speak their language. And so, yes, we are impressed by buzzword and buzzword bingo. In fact, I found out about halfway through this semester that my grad students had created a bingo card for me because I tend to fall back on similar phrases. Coffee made a lot of appearances on the bingo card. I think what that really tells me is that I need to get some new material. Our customers don't care about any of that. We need to help them understand why this is interesting, why this is relatable, and that means we have to avoid assumptions at all costs. So this is where we get into the game of, here's something that is similar to what you're trying to do. There is a pretty good chance you have not encountered that exact scenario, but we can get close. And so this is another opportunity for us to validate we were listening. We heard you. We know what you're saying. Is this about in the ballpark? Now, that again challenges us to ask the right questions at the right time. Now, if you're going to work with a personal trainer, if that person doesn't ask you about your goals, about your injury history, about your diet, about things you like to do that you don't like to do, you know what? That's probably not the right person for you. This is the game of trust, but verify. We need to be willing to challenge our own assumptions here as well. Now, I'm not in the sales side of the organization, but even if you're not in sales, we're all selling to a certain extent. And so we need to embody that always be closing mindset. And what does that mean for us as software engineers? Well, we're selling to our peers that, this is a good solution, this is a good design. We're selling to our managers, I'm competent, I know what I'm doing. We're selling to our customers that, we've got your best interests in mind. This means we've got to win this trust with these primary folks. Now, part of the challenge here is we don't always get direct access to our end users. This has improved dramatically in my career. I remember early on the idea of us having direct access to end users, like, oh, no, you're not allowed to talk to them. And I always thought that was very strange. I guess that's the person who has to take the requirements from the fax machine and bring them over to the developers. And I actually heard that on more than one occasion in the beginning of my career. And I always thought that was odd. So we need to go out there and collect information. Little secret, people love to talk. Give them an opportunity to. Ask good follow-up questions. Keep the conversation rolling. They give you an answer, ask a question about the answer, rinse, repeat until you get where you're trying to go. They will give you a ton of information. You just have to let them.
So So far in the wedding photography cadence, we've built trust by asking great questions and by showing them work that's relevant to the wedding or software experience that they want to have. So what's next? Next, we're going to build trust with a hands-on experience. For example, my wedding packages included a free engagement session. So this had two major benefits. First, I built trust by having them experience my process firsthand and with stellar results. That part's important. And when I first started in tech, I was actually shocked to see a very similar thing happen. I used to be on a pre-sales team and we would build proof of concepts for new or potential software clients. So this took the form of implementing the minimum viable software solution in a neutral cloud environment. So in this way, we could demonstrate our expertise, show off the product, give the customer a hands-on experience, and demonstrate again that we were listening before then moving this work into production. So second, with both wedding photography and software, we could identify any problems early through this hands-on experience. And that way you identify the problems before they become problems. So in photography, these could often be problems of self-perception. So for example, I had a groom who was sensitive about his forehead seeming too large. But I'm not one to judge people or how they look at all. And to me, he's just like a normal guy with a normal forehead. So I didn't see it without him telling me. And then he would have never told me about his forehead sensitivity had we not gone through this engagement session process. So this taste test experience likely saved me from going through the experience of him not liking his actual wedding day photographs because of the way he perceives his forehead to look. So software is the same. By making a relevant demo on time and with excellent communication, we're able to build a lot of trust.
I will admit that forehead thing hits a little close to home. My son takes great pleasure in delighting in the fact that I have more forehead than I used to have. So what are you going to do? Comes with the territory. This gives us an opportunity to demonstrate as well that we've listened to our customers. It's also a chance for us to show our expertise. Don't take it personally if they underestimate you. That's going to happen. Have faith. You'll have chances to prove yourself. And that's a really important piece of this equation.
So imagine in this photo that you're the subject. Your wedding photographer is asking you to stand by this like boring white wall while she crouches next to a rusty metal handrail and then points the camera at you. Like, what the heck is she doing? So during an engagement session, this moment is low stakes. So the couples would let me do like kind of offbeat stuff like this. And then later when the results come back and they're stellar and cool and offbeat, then that's when they really I've built a lot of trust with them.
Again, this is a chance for us to show our expertise, not tell. You've been there before. You've all worked on applications in the past. A lot of times our customers, this is the one chance they get to do this. They don't have your experiences. You've been on a lot more projects than they have. And we can get jaded this way for sure. Right? Because we've done this again and again. I remember when I was in college, I talked to my advisor one day asking him, like, why did you decide to go get your PhD and get into teaching? And he said, Nate, I got tired of doing the same apps over and over and over and over again. And I said, what do you mean? He said, basically everything we do is put a front end on a relational database. And I didn't understand that at the time. And then I got in the real world and I realized, oh yeah, we just put front ends on databases. Now I guess we have more data stores to pick from. It isn't just relational databases, but it's still the same basic concept.
Oh my gosh, I photographed so many weddings. I did the math once and I've personally been to over 500 weddings. I can't get that lifetime back. So to be completely honest, I got sick of them. I don't care what colors they chose. I don't care how cute the flower girl is. I don't care about the groomsmen's bow ties or how many tiers the wedding cake has. I've been there. I've done that. I'm so over it. But my wedding couples never had a clue that I felt that way. I never lost sight of the fact that for them, this is one of the most important days of their lives. So I complimented their creativity and taste, gushing over their wedding details, and it wasn't insincere. I meant it. I was truly happy for them, and I mirrored their excitement.
The challenge again for us, put yourself in their shoes. And while it may be just another Tuesday for us, it's not for them. And the analogy I like to make is pick your favorite band. There is a song that they have that's a hit that if you go to their event and they don't play it, you're going to be disappointed. They've probably played that song a lot, thousands of times, tens, hundreds of thousands of times potentially. It gets a little old for sure. And so I think the challenge there is they have to put themselves in the mindset of, you know what, there's someone in the audience who's never seen us do this song live. That's who we're playing it for. We want them to have a good experience. It's the same thing for us. We need to educate our stakeholders, and that means we have to slow down a little bit. One of the things that amazes me about our industry is we're always in a hurry. How many times have you heard, well, we don't have the requirements yet, but we have the developers, so start coding. You're like, well, what should we build? I don't know, just start coding. I mean, my wife's a business analyst, and I hear this from her all the time. You're like, we don't even have requirements yet, and now we're going to have to throw all this away. And there's a fantastic Rich Hickey quote that really brings this to mind. Most of the problems we have in software are problems of misconception. We don't have a good idea of what we're doing, and then we just go, 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 go. There is no type system. There is no unit test. There is no integration test that captures these problems, this problem of misconception. That's huge for us. Now, the other really interesting twist on this is that the end user and the customer may not be aligned. Now, I'm sure I'm not the only one in this room that has done a green screen rewrite where we take an aging mainframe system and migrate it to some newer technology. I did, well, several of these, but the one I'm thinking of in particular, manager really wanted to simplify things. The green screen required intimate knowledge of different codes, investment codes and city codes and region, just codes on top of codes on top of codes. So who did we go to work with to figure out what the new system should do? Well, the person who is the expert on it. And you know what? She was invaluable. She knew the system in and out. I would shadow her and I would have to stop her and say, could you please do that again? Because you moved too fast. I couldn't see what screens you were going through. I said, what key sequence did you just enter? And she would just look at me and just do a hand thing because she didn't even know. It was all muscle memory for her. Now, here's an interesting part of the equation, though. She didn't want a new system. Now, I didn't quite understand that at first. I'm like, what do you mean you don't want a new system? This is an ugly green screen system where we're basically we put this field here because there was room, not because it made sense. But it turns out she was an expert on the old system. And as soon as we built a new system, she wasn't the expert anymore. She was starting over at zero, just like everybody else, and she didn't like that idea. In ways subtle and not so subtle, she pushed back aggressively on us. She was very much of the opinion, and she uttered this in more than one meeting, everyone should just have to learn the codes. I did, so the new people should learn the codes too. That was not a sentiment shared by her management. Now, this is not a problem I can solve. This is actually a problem that had to go up the food chain. People higher in the pay chain than me had to make that situation resolve. But it was an important lesson to me that not everyone is rowing in the same direction. We're not always going in the same place. Now, the next step for us is to establish...
Wait, I'm just really excited about this one. Is it cool if I...
Absolutely.
Okay, I'm going to be the one to talk about this point.
Totally.
So this is one thing I want to say. You can be the one to create the excitement. Don't wait for it to come from someone else. You have control here. This photograph's going to be amazing. I can't wait for you to see. During this bridal portrait session, I asked this gorgeous bride to stand in this dingy little dirty shack. And then I rolled myself into the ball, got on the ground, and shot from the ground up into the window. And the whole time I'm just bubbling with excitement about how great it's going to be. And then when I show her the result, I've built even more trust. The client understands I have a purpose and a vision and expertise. And then on the wedding day itself, when I'm still acting like a weirdo and rolling around in the dirt, the couple gets it. They assure their wedding party, don't worry, she knows what she's doing. This is going to be awesome. And my excitement is transferred to them. I'm excited, the couple's excited, and anyone in our orbit becomes captivated. And in that way, during the actual project, the wedding day itself, I can leverage the credibility that I established earlier.
At the end of the day, they become your best advocates. That's what we want. We want our customers advocating on our behalf. That's huge. I knew that if I could get my customer fired up about something, they could make mountains move. I could go to my internal people and ask for something. They'd be like, LOL, go away. We don't have to answer to you. But if I got my customers fired up and they went and made that request, things couldn't happen fast enough. Now, there's 3 communication channels that we use, friends. There's the verbal, the words that are coming out of our mouths. There's the paraverbal, the how we're saying it. And then there's the nonverbal, the stuff that we do that we don't even kind of realize we're doing it. Now, I've known this, that I talk with my hands, but I didn't realize how much I did it until the pandemic. And then I'm doing my presentations from home, and my wife's sitting behind me, and my kids in the same place. And on more than one occasion, they're like, "You talk with your hands a lot." I also learned I don't have an indoor voice, which, again, I knew. But I realized at the beginning of the pandemic that my wife and I would have to negotiate at the beginning of the week as to who is going to be in our shared office space. Because the one time that she was on a meeting when I was also giving a presentation, someone on her call said, "Excuse me, Christine, I think you left your TV on." And she said, "No, that's just my husband." So these are the rules. This is the 738-55 rule, and this was invented by this gentleman, and basically it boils down to how do we communicate our message? How do we get things across? Only 7% is coming from the words. 38% is coming from tone. Think sarcasm. 55 is body language. Tone matters. If you want your customer to be excited, you need to be excited too. You need to show them that. Be the excitement you want to see in the world. Now, the thing you got to remember, folks, is we don't have to wait to be invited to this party. We can be fired up about these things. You have far more control on a project than you realize. You can be a change agent. That's a lot more fun, by the way, than just doing it the way we've always done it. Most dangerous phrase I hear in an organization. That's how we've always done it. So what's holding you back? What are you worried about? What is the worst thing that could possibly happen? We'll get you a towel. It'll be okay.
All right, back to wedding photography. So far, we've knocked their socks off in an interview. We've given them a taste of what we can do during the engagement session. And similarly with our software project, we've asked great questions and demonstrated we were listening by building out a relevant proof of concept. In each case, we've built a good amount of trust. So the next step is to clearly communicate our expectations about how the actual project should go, whether that's a wedding day or whether it's creating a software solution that will eventually make it into production. So the first major goal of project planning is to set expectations. This will likely be another opportunity to educate your clients. For example, with weddings, I'd request the wedding day schedule, but I get this request with written advice about the amount of time I needed to get everything documented properly. So if your client is working with a technology that's unfamiliar to them, they may appreciate some scaffolding rather than starting their solution from scratch. With wedding photography, I would ask for a list of formal photos. To help, I would provide an example list for them to work from in addition to written advice about what works well, how to make the process efficient. So then their job, instead of coming up with a list from scratch, is simply to change my list to reflect the names and relationships with their own families. So this has the added benefit of me shaping the data that they're giving to me in a way that I find it most usable. Finally, the third thing I would ask wedding clients for is a cast of characters, which is basically an explanation of who's in their families. So are their parents still together? Will their siblings be in attendance? Are their grandparents there? That sort of thing. So just like in software, it's helpful for me to understand why things are what they are instead of just what they are. So they could say they want a portrait of Bob, Alice, Mallory, and Trevor, and all together. And I have no idea who those people are. But if they say, oh, we want to picture the groom with his siblings, like, oh, that makes so much more sense. And in the end, I want both. I want to know what and why. So having my couples provide these three things, the wedding day schedule, the list of formal portraits, and the cast of characters, this has one additional benefit. These documents together define what success means for the wedding couple. So with weddings and with software projects, it's important to define success, not only to ensure that everyone has the same goals, but also so you have a source of truth to refer back to if anything goes awry. So the last point I want to make here is that I gather all this information well before the wedding day. That way I could make sure I was set up for success. Is there enough time in the schedule to document all that the committed couple wants that they told me that is important to them? If not, I need to have a conversation with them and either procure more time or we need to cut back on the list of portraits. So it's easy to have that conversation early on when you're planning the day. It's much harder to have that conversation in the moment as the wedding day is unfolding. So now that we feel totally set up for success, how are we meant to find those non-obvious expectations, like as little assumptions that are being made or details they simply forgot to mention? With weddings, I came up with a solution for this, and it actually took me a shamefully long time to figure this out. So with weddings, here's what I did to find these non-obvious expectations. Here's what I did. I would ask them directly. I would ask, is there anything you'd like me to photograph that wouldn't be immediately obvious to me? For example, are you carrying your grandfather's pocket watch? Are your mom and her siblings together for the first time in 10 years? Did you choose your venue because the wildflowers in the field next door remind you of your aunt who recently passed away? There are tons of things like this in a wedding and with software that I just could have never guessed.
So now that we have the lay of the land, it's time to apply that knowledge. Do we actually know what's important to our customer? Do we know what matters to them? Do we know all the stakeholders? This is one place we get in trouble all the time. You may have heard something, but is that really what the stakeholder said? Do you even know who all your stakeholders are? Now, some are very obvious. If we're talking about our wedding metaphor here, obviously the parents of the bride are a pretty major player in this drama. Others might be harder to discern. Now, you may not realize that actually it turns out grandma's a major person here because she's footing the bill for the whole thing. In fact, some might not even be visible unless you look really closely and realize, oh, I bet the dog's really important to these folks. Now, some may call these level 2 players. They are not directly involved, but they can absolutely help or hurt your project. And their presence is felt. If you're ever in a meeting and you hear some variation of, oh, the VP's never going to go for that. Okay, do we need to get her involved in the conversation then? There are times where the mere idea of a person gets in the way and everyone is just afraid of being stepped on because, oh, that person could crush us. We can't negotiate with someone that's not there. We have to proactively manage our stakeholders. And it's important to understand that not all stakeholders are created equally. You have to prioritize. So the way that I was taught to think about this was in terms of power and interest. So you have low power, low interest, high interest. And so it should be pretty obvious that these folks in the low power, low interest bucket are not your primary focus. This is not where you're going to spend a lot of your time. Obviously, high power, high interest are the folks that you're going to get them whatever they need. You need a cover sheet on your TPS report, no problem. I'll staple 3 on there just to be extra special, sure. That's not the only ones we care about, though. We need to be very aware of the high power, low interest people. The really interesting part of them is we need to make sure they are informed as to what's going on, and we need to make sure we're being very transparent.
So that's exactly my way of dealing with high power, low interest people, transparency. With weddings, this is often the person who's footing the bill. With software projects, this is often the person who's footing the bill. They want to be assured their money is being spent wisely, but they don't want or need to know every little detail. For software projects, I like to keep my Trello cards detailed and current or somewhere that is accessible that asynchronously to me. If this high power, low interest person takes an interest and suddenly pops up with questions, I could just point them at the card. And eventually they'd learn they don't even have to talk to me about it. They can just go satisfy their curiosity at any time with this current resource. And that way I would respect their time and mine.
That's an important piece of this equation. We have to make sure that we respect their time, that we let them come to the information. Do not take more of their time than you have to. Now, here's the other trick with these folks. Sometimes they only seem low interest right up until the point where they become very high interest.
So, the question I figured out earlier the hard way, is there anything you'd like for me to photograph at your wedding that wouldn't be immediately obvious to me? There's a story behind that. I started doing it because of this incident. As a Texas wedding in a small town outside of Austin, Texas, where I live, and the couple got married at their hometown church. Weeks later, I proudly shared the excellent finished photos, very high quality, and the bride's parents were furious. And I didn't even, I couldn't remember what they looked like. I didn't really know they cared about anything. So they were just so mad at me. And that's not a world I live in very often. So what they were mad about was I didn't take a photo of the bride and the groom alone together at the front of the church. Mind you, I did the wedding party in front of the church, the bridesmaids in front of the church, the family in front of the church. I did portraits of the bride and the groom alone together outside in the beautiful grounds on a lovely day. But because I didn't have this one permutation of the bride and the groom alone together at the front of the church, they just the day was ruined as far as these people were concerned. So that was a huge mistake in how I came to ask that question to try to root out stuff like that. So, yeah.
Yeah. Is there anything else that we need to know about? Again, transparency is our key equation here. Now, obviously, the folks in that upper right bucket are really important. The high power, high interest folks. This is a key to success for us. Now, again, some are very obvious, some not so much. Some are so incredibly busy, we're not going to get enough of their time, and that's its own special challenge, but we cannot afford to ignore them. They also have a tendency to show up at the last minute and just unwind everything we did and remake all the decisions that we already made. So you have to be proactive and get out and engage with them. And this means you may have to ask, what is the best way for me to work with you? How do you want this to happen? This means we have to have straightforward conversations. And I know that's not easy. We a lot of times like to work with indirection, but you have to be proactive here. And one of the things that I have had to relearn this lesson constantly in my lifetime is silence is not always golden. You know, we're sort of taught if the command line doesn't say anything, it worked. And then you get into a relationship with a human being and you realize that silence actually is often the opposite of golden. These folks may not check up on a regular basis, and so we have to figure out how to best keep them informed. Is it a weekly summary? Is it sort of a digest of what's going on in the project? What do they want? We, again, must respect their time. Now that takes us to the bottom right quadrant. These are our friends in the high interest, low power, and it's very tempting to ignore them.
Well, I loved high power, low power, high interest people. They often had so much love for the committed couple and they're looking for ways to help. They want to express their affection with acts of service. And they're looking for a sense of importance. This is true with software people too. Low power, high interest people are often seeking that sense of importance. So when we find ways that these people can help, it can be a big win-win. And weddings, perhaps I need someone to go fetch Uncle Prem from cocktail hour to come be in the portraits like he was supposed to. In software, high power, low power, high interest person might be someone who's relatively new to the technology and excited to learn, or someone affected by the changes that you're making to their organization and it brings them a lot of anxiety. So if you help them feel seen and heard and like they're contributing, so ask them to review documentation you've written or to pair program with you while you're debugging.
Extremely useful, folks. Take advantage of their passion. Their enthusiasm is often very contagious. They can be fantastic advocates for you. They will also volunteer to help in a lot of cases. You know, inevitably, you maybe want to shadow somebody, you want to sit with them while they work to see what they actually do. These folks are great for that. Hey, could I interview you about how you use this system? Hey, would you mind just trying this out for 20 minutes and let me know? Could I get your input on how to do this? Software projects have a lot of toil, and we need to try to take advantage of folks that can help us with that. They're not always glamorous things that we need done. They still need to get done. So don't turn away someone that wants to help you.
So I've made this mistake before. So one wedding, I was shooting the family portraits, working from that list we talked about that the clients gave me, and I didn't notice anything amiss. Once the final wedding photographs were delivered, I got a phone call. I picked up, it was the groom's mom. She was sobbing. She was devastated that she wasn't in many of the family portraits. And so I explained, like, oh, it's not my fault. Like, I got the list from the couple, but that actually made things worse. She started crying even more. She's like, my son doesn't love me. Like, he loves his dad's new wife more. And ultimately, clearly this is a deeper problem that has nothing to do with me or with photography. And ultimately, interactions like these is what made me run away from the wedding photography profession like a bat out of hell. But I can't help but think if I would have noticed the groom's mom on the wedding day and taken steps to make her feel important and included, then maybe this whole situation could have been avoided.
Yeah, it sounds like some therapy was necessary there. And I hope you never get that kind of drama on a software project, but I mean, there is drama anytime you get people together. There's no
if you
getting
have
around
anyone
that.
sobbing on a software project, will you come tell me that story?
Wow, I would like to know that story. Now, the problem here is if we ignore these folks, they can actually sabotage our projects or at least work against our interests. So make sure you take the time to understand your stakeholders. What do they care about? What's their background? How'd they get into this space? What are their concerns? What are they influenced by? Who do they listen to? So much of what we have to do in software is influence the influencers. We rarely have direct access to decision makers. We have to sort of bounce the ball off the wall to get stuff done. But don't be afraid to ask these direct questions. And you do need to be aware of any red flags. You got to kind of have your antenna up. Is there some conflict here that I'm going to need to navigate? I was at an organization where, and I found out this after I left, two of the founders had literally not spoken to each other in months. They couldn't even be in the same room with one another. It was brutal. The other interesting sort of dynamic on that one is one of the founders was in a relationship with one of the employees, which seemed really strange to me, but okay, it's fine. Do these people have a history that I need to be aware of? Now, once we have that trust that we talked about earlier, we can ask these direct questions and we can get that information, because it's much better that we avoid stirring up that hornet's nest if we can. A lot of times, these problems are solved simply by listening. In a lot of cases, people just want to be heard. So give them a chance. We may not be able to fix the problem, but simply listening goes a long way towards diffusing this emotion. So take the time to do that.
So, as I mentioned earlier, well before the wedding day, I would collect information from the committed couple and double check there was enough time in the schedule to document all that the wedding couple said was important to them. So, if not, I need to have that conversation I mentioned about compromises. Do you have a large extended family and you want to include every single one of them in every various family portrait permutation? That's fine, but it means we either need to build more time into the schedule or cut back on the artistic portraits of just the two of you? Or do you want professional portraits of the sparkler exit at the bitter end of the night? That's great. Let's do it. But it means you'll have to keep me on the clock for 2 hours worth of drunken dancing photos, which I guarantee are not as cute as you think they're going to be.
So the challenge for us is making sure people understand the consequences here. If you want this, then that means we have to do that. Yeah. That will cost you either in money or time or both. And so we need to understand people's priorities. You've probably heard that old project management, phrase, good, cheap, fast, pick two. I've been on projects where speed is the number one priority. This has to be done by this date. All right, well, guess what? We're going to have to cut scope or quality, or you're going to have to give me more resources. Oh, we can't change cost, like that's fixed, that's the only pile of money we have. All right, some features are not going to make it to the valley beyond, or again, we're going to have to cut quality, although I will stress that is rarely a good idea. Software is about trade-offs. One of the things that's so challenging about our world is there is no objectively best solution. There's least worst. There's lots of least worst, but our job is to balance these trade-offs. This is the art of what we do. This is the art of architecture, the art of design, the art of software. So one of the questions that we run into in this cloud world is, hey, do we need to replicate across multiple data centers? Do we need to be able to fail over to a completely different provider? Every so often we have an instance where we'll just pick on US East 1 goes down and like a third of the internet goes with it. And it's very tempting for us to all kind of poo-poo and say, oh, those apps, those sites, they should have had redundant backup in place. It turns out there's 3 answers to every question you've ever gotten in computer science. There's 42. That's to see who's well-read. There's my favorite pattern as an architect, another layer of indirection. But there's the answer I have to give more often than not, which is it depends. Now, some people get mad at me when I say it depends because they think I'm trying to end the conversation or I'm trying to flee the conversation. Not at all. I need more context. I need more detail. So in the case of your region goes down, your app goes down. All right, well, it's not free to be able to fail over. So how much would it have cost the applications in terms of their engineering effort, in terms of the cost of having that replication in place, versus how much revenue did they lose by being down for a couple hours or so? It's all a trade-off. Now, for us, there is no such thing as no. It's a negotiation. It's if you want this, then that means you have to give up that. You can negotiate priorities, although not all customers understand this. Many years ago, I was on a project. Customer came to us with this massive list of requirements, and we kind of looked at it and we said, hey, Joe, you need to prioritize this. There's no way we can get these all done in the amount of time you've given us. And he said, oh, yeah, no, I understand, no problem. And so he came back a week later and he was very proud and he showed us his 1s and his 1As. And we just kind of looked at him and said, I don't think you understood the assignment. Please try again. Our job is to present options. Our job is to advise. Again, we're trying to be the trusted advisor to our clients. We do not have unlimited time. We do not have unlimited budget. And by the way, that ends poorly in most cases. There's a fantastic book that walks through what happens when you have unlimited time and unlimited budget. It does not end well. Our job is to help our customers see the trade-offs. the end of the day, it's their choice. Our job is to influence them. Now, they may still do what we don't want them to do, right? So I live in Minnesota. It gets very cold there in the winter. And so whenever I see somebody reaching their tongues towards a block of ice, I get a little bit of anxiety because I know how that ends. Please don't do that. Patients sign out against medical advice all the time. Don't take it personally. Our job here is to say, all right, if you want that, then this means you're going to have to give up this other thing. Our job is to shed light on the problems, shed light on the risks. The decision makers are almost always further up the food chain than us. But if we've established ownership early on, they know the consequences and they know what's at stake. So we give our best advice, we let the chips fall where they may. Now, if we've established those priorities early, that helps us avoid a lot of these issues. Because if we start getting into this circular conversation, we can say, hang on a sec here. Remember at the beginning when the VP said, this is the priority. You're now saying this. How are we supposed to proceed? We don't always have to be the bad cop. If we do this right, an invested decision maker will come in and crack the whip. It's not a no. It's a trade-off. How do we move forward? Now, in a perfect world, we try to make this their idea. Now, there's two ways you can get somebody to do something. There's the hammer. I'm going to order you to do it. And there's the ninja. I'm going to make you think it was your idea. Now, I'll tell you a story about my son to help you understand this concept. Now, my boy's a teenager now. He's actually taller than me, which he takes great delight in pointing out to me. But when he was younger, the daycare center we took him to had a standing rule. Thou shalt wash your hands before being released into general population. Anybody who's been around toddlers knows their personal hygiene is not always top of mind. And, let's try to keep the spread of germs to a minimum. So we'd get to the daycare center, be early in the morning. I would have had no espresso at this point, so I'm not at the top of my game. And I'd say to my young son, hey, buddy, please go wash your hands. Now, if you've also been around kids, you know what comes next. He would just look at me and say, no. Okay, now I'm not sure quite what to do here, so I repeat the request a little louder in case he couldn't hear me. I remind him of our relationship status in case he forgot overnight. I'd say, Everett, I'm your father. Go wash your hands. To which he would just cross his little arms and look at me and say, no, never. Okay, now I don't know what to do, right? I'm out of ideas. Do I deploy the foot? What does that even mean? Luckily, my wife is much better at this than I am, and so she would look at our boy and say, hey, buddy, I bet I can get my hands washed before you. And she'd take one step towards the sink, and he would run over and wash his hands and say, ha, mommy, I'm going to beat you. And she'd say, yes, you are. We can use that to our advantage. We can convince them it was their idea. That's what we're striving to do here. That's much more powerful than me ordering you to do this. Developers in particular are like cats. If you order a developer to do something, they're going to go in the opposite direction on principle, right? So I want to make you think it's your idea. That's my goal. Now, the other interesting twist here is if we do this right, we can actually shape the question to give them the illusion of control. Do you want to take a bath or do you want to take a shower? See, you have a choice. You're still getting clean. All right, so for the sake of argument, let me skip ahead a little bit here. Despite our best intentions, not every software project is successful. Turns out failure happens. It's rarely the result of a bad technology choice. It does happen. We ignore people, and we cannot afford to do that. Whether we like it or not, whether it's convenient or not, software projects are people projects. They're full of personalities, they're full of emotions, they're full of opinions. And as much as it may be uncomfortable to work with people, it comes with the paycheck. I hope we've given you some things that you can apply. The challenge for us is to be prepared. Don't be afraid to reuse knowledge, even if it comes from a non-traditional, non-obvious field. Thank you folks so much for hanging out with us. If you want to see more, she does amazing stuff.
I have a show called Enlightening on Tanzu.tv where I invite experts in cloud technologies relatable to developers to come onto my show. I stand behind the light board and I draw out the concepts as they're explaining them to me. So I did a recent one on Knative eventing. Later today, I'll be presenting about Knative serving at 5:30 here today, and I'll be drawing as I talk. And if you come find me afterward, I have some enlightening stickers too. So if you see me around at all, just stop me for a sticker, please, and say hi.
I do a live stream as well on it's interview, basically. It's me trying to recreate the hallway track that we've missed for the last 2 years. So it's also an excuse for me to hang out with my friends for an hour, hour and a half and pretend I'm doing work. So that's my goal with that particular show. And it's just so nice to be back in the real world. Thank you all so much for hanging out with us. I really appreciate it. I hope that was useful. If you have questions, we'll hang around, but thank you very much. Appreciate it. Cheers.
Thank you so much.